Good evening. Thank you all. Just a few quick introductions. Representing the Planning and Zoning Department tonight for the showcase. Just wanted to go over what we do and who's here tonight. Planning and Administration, that's me. For zoning, we have Lisa Rill, our zoning administrator, and Jane Dion, our assistant zoning administrator. For building, we have Derek Shepherdson, our building inspector. And wastewater is not represented tonight. That's Denise Johnson-Turk. I try and minimize wastewater over dinner anyway, so that's not bad. So those are the sort of core functions of our department and major divisions within it. I'm going to take you through a little bit about what each of them does, and feel free to chime in or ask questions along the way. We have also tonight the chair of our Development Review Board, Matt Gamage, and the chair of our Planning Commission, Pam Loringer, sorry, as I look straight at you. The zoning function oversees DRB reviews and staffing, or Development Review Board, which hears all subdivision, site plan, conditional use, variance applications, and rules on them. They meet on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. We've gone down to once a month and tried to really stack it as opposed to having twice a month with light agendas. And that seems to have been working out well, is to get something that you guys come out for and just stay in process. The zoning also does zoning permits. Those would be home occupancy, home business type uses. Certificates of occupancy, which are often required as part of closing certificates of compliance. And sales, enforcement, which is litigation, which we try and minimize. The Department of Financial Accounting, everything goes over to the clerk's office, is kind of up there. We have also some accounting that needs to be done in audits and what have you, and that's done through the zoning division. Jane does a lot of that for us. Review of building permits for zoning compliance. We look Lisa looks at each one of the building permits that comes in to make sure they're meeting setbacks, heights, the use is appropriate, parking spaces, what have you. And technical review committees. Technical review committee we started a few years ago. We used to have a set time for those to meet. They were on Tuesday, and we've run those now upon request. They're free of charge, and they often work well for businesses that are looking to relocate to Colchester, people that are looking to purchase property. We just come in and say, well, what is it that you're proposing to do? They may or may not have a specific site in mind, and sort of advise them of what the process is and how they can move forward, and try and research for them if there's what permits might be needed, if there's sufficient on-site wastewater for what they're proposing. And that just makes the whole Development Review Board process, I think, function a whole lot easier when you have somebody at the front end of things just telling you what the process is going to be. I think helps with that process and sort of giving everybody exactly what they're going to be going through and sort of help guide them through the process. This is a little bit about where we're at. The great thing is zoning complaints are down. You take a look at over the years, this line, this purple line, those are zoning complaints, and they've sort of leveled off, which is nice. And you can see compliance letters, which are associated with sales and refinancings of properties, have been steadily going up. Development Review Board applications. There were a couple of spikes. This one was right after the floods of May 2011. We saw a lot of variances for building of camps, seawalls, a bunch of smaller permits coming through, not necessarily large subdivisions. So if you just take a look at the pure number of applications, that can be a little bit deceiving. What we've seen come back in the past year and a half have been a strong number of new subdivisions, site plans, those sorts of things. We've tried to also increase the number of ones that we do administratively, so it doesn't have to go before the board. It's a quicker turnaround, it's less work and time for the applicant. It's sometimes more work for staff, but it's just saves the Development Review Board time as well as applicants' time, so that's worked well. A couple other things to quickly note here. Accessory apartments and seasonal camp conversions have held steady. This sort of spike in fines was we had to tear down an unsafe building and were compensated through that for a tax sale. But for the most part, that has remained steady too. DRB applications have been gradually going up, as well as certificates of occupancy. So just a few trend lines.
What's your take on the reason of the decline in zoning complaints?
Well,
Is it because all the problems have been solved, or people are getting along, or what's your theory?
Unfortunately, not all of that. People are still not getting along with their neighbors. But we've become a lot more proactive in terms of not just taking anonymous phone calls with saying, my neighbor's being really loud at night, click.
Okay.
Well, who exactly is your neighbor? Give us an address. Okay, what is your name? So if we go out and we don't observe it, we can call you back and say, is there a better time to go out and observe it? And ask a lot more questions. And so I think that sort of deflates some of the complaints that aren't significant or warranted. And also I think we've been working a lot more proactively with them. We've taken some things all the way through environmental court litigation recently. I like to think that a strong defense is often a strong offense or vice versa, and they're somehow corollary. So I'd like to think that that was time and efforts well spent. But I think too, what you saw during this timeline was during the recession. You had less building activity and more people staying put, and some discontent with quality of life issues. We often get some of the things that the police department can't pick up. Had some proactive conversations with Chief Morrison lately about how we might be able to be even more proactive, because there are some things that just fall between the police department and ours, and they're quality of life issues that neither of us can solve, but they're obviously some key issues for citizens. So trying to investigate some new ways to tackle chicken complaints, for instance.
Thinking about mediation efforts.
Yeah. We don't regulate animals, but we often get complaints about them. So, and I like to say too, it's a lot of diligent follow-up, and it's not always easy, but I have staff that are willing to pick up the phone and give a call as opposed to sending a certified letter and say, hey, we haven't heard from you, was that roof fixed? Give a call to various different people, or have Derek show up and talk to the on-site property manager and just say, hey, you know, if I stop back next week, could you fix this? So I'd like to think that hopefully we're being a little bit more proactive. A couple of 2011 flooding that we saw, and as I said, some of the spikes that we saw were due in FY12 to the number of DRB permits were in response to the flooding. So it wasn't necessarily DRB new construction, it was DRB sort of fixing what we had. Building functions. Moving on to Derek Shepherdson's sort of purview here. They oversee all building permits, certificates of occupancy. I think this was Myers' site CO inspection of some of the standpipes and what have you. Now includes energy certificates. I'll talk about that later. That's an unfunded mandate from the state. DRB application review. Derek looks at each one of our DRB applications to make sure that they're meeting Chapter 7 for fire access and comments, and tries to be very proactive with that, and is involved in those technical review committees at the start to let people know what they're getting into in terms of what would be required if they retrofit, for instance, more than 25% of a building, more than 10,000 square feet, they might get into sprinklers. Enforcement of code and permit compliance, public outreach and education. There are requirements within Chapter 7 of our Code of Ordinance that after a certain date, all buildings that had sprinkler systems had to have a 4-inch Storks connection, the locator light, and things of that nature, and educating people on those issues. And he also serves as our deputy health officer. So our health officer is now available or otherwise occupied. He'll go out on some of the health complaints as well. A little bit about building and zoning permit revenue. Building permit revenue has increased as new construction starts have gone up, which is great. There are a couple of interesting things to note here. These are building permit revenue has been going up. Building permits number of issued has actually gone down a little bit. But what we were seeing during their session was a bunch of people staying put in their homes and doing kitchen remodels. So instead of buying the new house with the new kitchen, we saw a bunch of interior model, smaller types of permits, which increased the number of them, but not necessarily the value. FY12, we saw Akabe permits were issued, as well as I think the Department of Health. Those have recently come online. Those were a long time in the construction process. Also of note is we haven't, up until this past December, which isn't shown on here, the current fiscal year, we hadn't issued a new permit for a building at Severance Corners in a couple of years too. So that definitely drives up the value as well as the revenue.
Sarah, health department building.
Yep.
They have to get a building permit. They pay the same fees as anybody else that
Yes,
gets a
they
building
do.
permit. Can we do the same inspection activities on that building that we
Yes.
would every other?
Yes.
And there were a variety of services that we performed as a staff to assist them in the transition. Herb and I lobbied to get an additional pilot payment in support of those services. And we just got the check delivered to us today. It was, what, $32,000?
Wow. That pays for dinner. Fantastic.
Wow, that's great.
I'll vote for you in March.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll vote for you.
Yeah.
As I said, I try to minimize wastewater over dinner, but as you guys are finishing up eating, we are a delegated community. We're one of 2 delegated communities to issue state wastewater permits, which means that you're dealing directly with our office if you need to change a state wastewater permit. It's Denise within our office.
Denise needs a French box?
She goes out on, this is a test pit that an engineer has dug on private property, and noting modeling of soils and what have you. She's also our health officer and goes out on the various different complaints we get associated with health officer duties. She reviews building permits for septic compliance. There is a house for sale that I think a number of us have been dealing with that is it probably a tear down that people have been saying, well, how many bedrooms could I put back on it? What's the age of the system? And so she's been talking to folks about how many bedrooms to put back and how far to stay off the tank, and that's very helpful in our building permit process because it often involves an on-site wastewater system. She also does local wastewater permits. Those are just tank replacements. Those are sort of leveled out. I'll show you in a minute. She's the deputy building inspector. When Derek's not very often on vacation, but out, she'll go out and document a framing inspection or shed inspection. So oftentimes when there's a closing coming up and something's very time sensitive, she can go out and pinch hit for him and do a CO type of inspection on some of our smaller ones. She does have the code background that Derek has. She also helps with the mini wastewater grant program. This was our revolving loan program for on-site wastewater, which has transitioned since the state took over doing that into a mini grant program, and often helps people fill out the applications and awareness of, we do have, just for the public record, a mini grant program where people that have a failed wastewater system, know that they have a septic issue that needs to be addressed, can apply for grant money to investigate those. So that's a great feature that we have, is we don't have to just identify an issue and help people resolve it.
So there are only 2 communities that do local wastewater permitting.
Charlotte and Colchester.
And the others, a lot of the others are on sewer. So they don't need, Burlington doesn't need to have that authority.
We're
that
one of the
correct?
few communities of our size with mostly on-site wastewater. We have over 5,000 on-site wastewater systems. Most of the other Chittenden County towns do have sewer. So in terms of those issues of reviewing a building permit and saying, okay, it looks like they can be rebuilt, but where's the wastewater system? Where's the replacement system? A lot of other communities don't have those issues. So. Okay, moving on quickly here. Wastewater permit revenue. It's been going up as we've been seeing new construction starts. Health violations have also been declining. Denise really tries to work with landlord tenants and as best as possible and resolve quickly and efficiently some of the health violations that we get. The tanks, as I said, have been holding steady. I'll move on quickly here. Planning functions. Part of what I do is I oversee the planning commission, help staff them. I have oversight of the department, long-range planning with the growth center, Department of Fiscal Administration, grant application management, software, GIS management, administration of rules, regs, outreach. And this is Pam and a couple members of my planning commission, Tim Mahonen and Paul Simon here. Rob and Bob are missing.
I just wanted to note that Sarah's also been the president of the Vermont Planners Association for a couple of years now, and she has the pulse on what's happening at the state level and legislatively. She's regarded very highly by the legislature to give advice on how to change legislation.
Thanks. I think we'll be probably called upon some of that this year. I'll hit that in a minute, but just day-to-day operations. File reviews. You come into our office and you need to look at your file. You're putting on the market, your attorney has advised you. Go in and see that you've closed out all your permits. We'll pull the file for you, or researchers that are researching for sale or refinance. Property owner inquiries. Your septic tank is giving off an alarm. It needs to be pumped. You're not sure where the tank cover is. Come in. We'll help you find the plans. Accept, review, and issue building wastewater permits. Interpret zoning regs. Some of those questions of, I'm looking at a place on Hercules Drive to locate my business to, is it allowed use, what do I need to do, those sorts of things. Could I put an addition on my house? Consult with potential developers, engineers, business and property owners. It's great, every day is different, you're never sure what you're going to get. Things that aren't necessarily so great is, this is not designed for you to read, but this is
Be a
one of
test
the
later.
state calls them matrices of despairs. I think one of the things I wanted to communicate tonight is there's certain, our department, a lot of what we do is laid out under state statute. This is the process for zoning permits, for instance. We've tried to adapt this and make it as quick and painless as possible, and this is the one for state wastewater permits too. I think the great thing that we have in our office is you can come in and see us and talk with us, and we'll sit down and talk with you and help you through the process. We're a lot more hands-on and can try and expedite this process as much as possible. So talking a little bit more about departmental obligations, we have the wastewater delegation, we now have shoreline delegation. We're one of 2 communities in the state of Vermont that have, Greensboro I think is the other one, that you don't need to get a separate state permit for work in the shoreline district. You just need one through us. MS4 reporting on stormwater. I think Brian is going to talk about stormwater and the IWRM a little bit later tonight. Energy certificate compliance, an unfunded mandate from the state. We're now reporters in terms of everybody's required to get an energy certificate if you're doing so much in rehab work or you're doing new construction. Gross area designation, we have to make sure that that's done prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy. New town center designation, just went through that this fall as part of the gross area designation and maintaining that. State revolving loan fund for wastewater, we stopped issuing it, but we still have the accounting for it as well as existing loans to follow up on. We have to report to the census, Dodge reports, things of that nature that make inquiries to us. Notification to adjacent towns of any time that we're changing. For instance, you're going to be getting a supplement from the Planning Commission. We're looking at changing the zoning regs again for some very good reasons. We have to notify all the adjacent towns, regional planning, state of Vermont, as well as anything that goes before the board. We have to notify all the abutters and have to deal with some of the subsequent questions. Requests for action. The below one is the Casa Romano before it was taken down. This is just a little bit about citizen complaints, often unknown. We don't know what we're getting into when we take them in. We're required by a state statute to appoint a health officer and respond to that. We don't want to be in the middle of landlord-tenant issues, but as a town, we're required to have a health officer, and unfortunately, we sometimes get dragged into some ugly issues. RFAs, we try and resolve them through phone calls and site visits. Ticketing, litigation, last resorts. We, very rarely have to resort to that, and that's a good thing. Recent initiatives, coordination and inspections with the assessors department. Derek and the assessor are now going out on file COs, trying to even share a car ride when possible. Receiving permits applications digitally, that's had its challenges. Computerized receipting, we had an old ledger book, we've moved away from that. It's been a lot of change in the past couple of months. Passport training, we're now, Jane's training to help fill in with the clerk's office for passports. Codification project, Muni Code, hopefully that clerk base, where all the new ordinances are going to quickly move into the regular ordinances. In the next few weeks, we'll get updated code books. Coordinate tax map updates with the assessor's office. A data link between our software and his software, just got the green light, that's working today, and we don't have to have them hand digitize those anymore. It's just a simple push of a button. Paperless staff DRB reviews. Instead of everybody making photocopies of plans, passing them out, getting them back, correlating them, giving them to the DRB, people are uploading them now. It's working most of the time. Boxing PZ files for scanning. We're endeavoring on a project to scan all of our files and digitize them and upload them into our software. We're also participating in what Brian's going to talk about later, the SWAC.
I think what I'll say is this town is light years ahead of many other towns in Vermont in terms of being able to access records online. It's fabulous. I know Karen Richard was a leader on that, and Sarah's office is going through the laborious process of going through every single file, getting rid of duplicate information, and then we're shipping it off down to Manchester, New Hampshire to get them digitized. So it's an incredible undertaking, but that will make it accessible to people from the comfort of their home.
Yep, and my staff has been excellent in trying to troubleshoot issues as they arise. We've had a lot of good questions arise from it. Unfortunately, there is not another town in Vermont that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, how'd you do this? I at least now have another town in New Hampshire, but a lot of this has been sort of discover and design as we go. Projects on the horizon, Mounts Bay Village project, municipal planning grant that we got for new zoning and development standards. That's coming up. The RFPs are due on the 20th. CRS application to FEMA. I think you guys maybe got a short briefing on what that is. I'll hit that very quickly. Supplement 36 of the zoning regs. Property record scanning project. Severance Corners lease agreement is part of our new town center requirement. We have to lease a building there. We've been working on that. Shoreline floodplain zoning regulation reviews. Wastewater operating permits. Online permitting. I'll quickly scroll through them. Mounts Bay Village project, this has been a while in coming. We have regional planning right now evaluating the traffic capacity for West Lakeshore Drive and a couple of key intersections. That was funded through the FY15 UPWP. We now have a state-funded grant for $16,000 to evaluate the zoning and design standards. That's the RFP, request for proposal, due back on the 20th. I'm sort of excited to see what we're going to get. I've already had a high level of interest in that. It builds upon 2014 CCI work, as well as work from the Planning Commission back from 2007. We only have a $4,000 match, which is budgeted in this year's Planning and Zoning Department. Possibility of an EPA resilience project. I got a call the other day from the EPA saying, we might want to use Colchester as a demonstration of what good things are going on. They're looking at a town of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and us. So I hope to bring more to you on that later. CRS application, shoreline floodplain regs, just very quickly. It's a rating provided to communities based upon your current development standards, codes, practices, educational efforts, and flood resilient construction. Enrollment is free, but requires annual reporting. Community visit and audit determines their rating. CRS discounts on flood insurance range from 5% to 45%, and the designation means the highest level of disaster reimbursement eligibility in the state. This is going to be more reporting. That's another thing the new software helps with. Reporting functions from that are fairly easy. So if it's free and it just requires additional reporting, it will be fairly easy for us to accommodate with these new online resources. And just to sort of tie this in with where the Planning Commission is going, they have some draft shoreline floodplain regs, which will hopefully make life easier in terms of learning from that 2011 process and rebuilding and cutting down on hopefully a lot of the red tape. They're looking to bring that back when the summer seasonal folks are back in May. Severance Corners, just a quick update as to legislative stuff. 2 quadrants now are under Act 50 due to previous state permits that otherwise qualify for an exemption. We're hoping to get some legislative release on that with some specific language. A lease agreement has been drafted for the sales office we used as a welcome center due to a requirement of the new center designation. We're hoping to change that to be, instead of just it's a requirement for civic building or civic use. I think everybody that looked at the application said that we ought to be able to do a civic use, and that might be as meaningful or more meaningful than an actual building. Mirror image of the residential construction under construction now is going to be going up right after. So we're quickly going to have a second building that's going to be a mirror image of the one going up.
So, sorry, the quadrant that has construction
Yes,
is not under Act 250.
it is.
It is. So what are the 2 that are now under Act 250 that weren't
The south, both of the south quadrants are.
under Act 250?
We thought the Brigantes might be free of it, but unfortunately back in 1991 they pulled an Act 250 permit for a 12 parking space area for their food truck, and now it's under Act 250.
So only Owl's Glen or whatever is
That has the potential to be, but again,
not under Act 250.
correct,
Because the purpose of the growth center in part was to avoid Act 250.
exactly.
And it sounds like we've,
So Herb and I had a discussion today with the chair of the Natural Resources Committee down in the House, and we offered some language, and he seemed
Food truck.
very interested in it.
who?
It's a food truck.
Okay.
Pat Brennan is working on legislation as well.
Unbelievable.
I know, it's crazy.
Ryan,
We ought to be able to grandmother that, which should be the reverse of the grandfather clause, and get rid of that parking lot.
so just very quickly to wrap up with the PowerPoints and bring you downstairs quickly. Integrated Water Resources Management Plan recommendations. Brian's going to hit you with this later, but I just want to say about how this integrates with our department. It determined that our on-site wastewater management levels are sufficient with the current oversight, which is great. We're doing a lot of good things by having the state delegation program. We don't need to go to higher sort of utility, but it would be nice if we could have operating permits, because now when we issue a permit for a system, we say, okay, see you later in 3 years when it fails. We have no way of following up with some people and say, hey, you're a high-risk area. Could you show us proof that every 3 to 5 years you pump out your system, you clean your filter, things of that nature, and that might need a legislative change in order to allow that. I wanted to do a demonstration of our new software. I also wanted to bring you downstairs. That's the end of my presentation. Some feedback. Do you want to take a quick walk through downstairs and I can show you the software? Do you want me to show you the software quickly now before we head downstairs?
I'm open.
Let's go downstairs. Okay, John, pack up the camera.
The files, I just want to quickly show you, it's a monumental task. Actually, Karen's husband, Ed, has been great help with helping box things up and go through the files. Just a quick overview of what the software is that we have. It's going to become a much more powerful tool once we have everything scanned in. There'll be a computer in the central research area where people can go, but it'll also be available online. People won't need to come in necessarily to look up their files. It'll be a free online tool. So I can look up by street name, by owner name. They want to give me an address and I'll see what I find.
621 Williams Road.
We want a juicy
Williams
address.
Road?
What do you got?
621 Williams Road, who owns that?
Yeah, let's throw that out there, shall we?
It's a 1 or 2 zoning violation.
Yeah.
There's an open permit for the deck, I know that.
Yeah.
Oh, it is?
So there's fire departments out there right now.
Could be.
Oh, good.
Well, the insurance is paid up, Mark.
That's
Isn't
good.
that the most important thing?
It is.
Sure do.
While she's booting that up, Kathy O'Reilly, our Economic Development Director's office, is right there. And there's a lot of great synergies between the Planning and Zoning Department and Kathy. She's promoting development in our town.
Right.
And so the conversations that she has with these folks on a daily basis is really helpful.
It's great. We try and bring her into those technical review committees too. And sometimes we get a property owner that we were dealing with somebody that was looking into light manufacturing. That particular site didn't work out. She's now working with them and has been very diligently to try and find something in Colchester that does work out. So you said 621 Williams Road? And
Very complicated.
yeah.
Beware.
So there is a open building permit for a fence.
Well, that should have been closed out.
It's
There's one for the
a
deck.
6-foot high cedar fence, 280 feet,
Yeah.
issued back in 2014.
Yeah.
And let's see what else we can find on that. Anybody have? Oh, lots of permits on that. So this has the ability of, I'm not sure if anything's digitized with any of these, we'll see.
So
But I can
the
look up,
fence has
yep,
to come
there's
down.
one from the 1970s.
If the neighbors complain.
Oh, look at that, you just pulled up the permit.
Yep, I just pulled it.
Yeah.
So this attaches all those permits. And they're gonna be scanned as PDFs and OCR, so you, similar to what you do with text, with Clerkbase in terms of a text search, we'll be able to do that with our building permits. So there's a family room addition, 12 by 30 approximate. Back when Jay Morrill owned the property,
Yeah.
and let me see what year that was. That was 72. So this.
And that has not been cleared yet, huh?
Oh, no, that
Okay.
it has been cleared. But you can go back in and you can see all the different permits that are associated with it.
Wow.
That's amazing.
This also links in, and I don't want to steal Public Works thunder on this, but our ViewWorks software, which is a GIS tool. So if you go into ViewWorks software in GIS and spatially locate it, and you can turn on, is there a deer wintering yard there, where if they're an endangered species, pull up all the permits, it's all there. They've been using it for public infrastructure as well. So we're actively trying to tie in with Public Works, with the assessors
So
department.
this is not online yet, but the goal is to make it available at some
It is
point.
online, but we have it locked down, so not everybody can go into it yet. It's not
Okay.
ready for prime time,
Mhm.
but it is online right now. And it will be online and more accessible to the public, and as we get everything scanned in and make sure that we sort through the troubleshooting with it and are able to help people walk through that process, it will be available.
When do you
to
think
everybody.
prime time's gonna happen? I won't
Hopefully
hold you
within
to
a
it,
year.
but within a year.
Hopefully within a year. It's part of our budget request for the next fiscal year too, is we're trying to span it. Karen's helping out with some of the records money, records retention and preservation money. And I'm asking for it, as well as in the next year's fiscal budget, to help scan it. But hopefully it will, as you can see, that time spent going back and forth down to the basement. Well, you have somebody standing at the front counter that their septic tank's overflowing, they just want to find out where the tank cover is. You know, those sorts of things that will help us improve customer service, expedite things, make us more efficient. We're hoping a year's time.
Are you getting any complaints from the developer community regarding, time lags and efficiency and things like that? Or are they generally happy with the service that they're getting from your
I think
office?
they'd be generally happy. I'd love to hear from them on that. In some other towns, you can walk into, that don't have localized building codes, you can walk in and get a permit that same day, because it's just a zoning check. Is it meeting the setbacks?
Yep.
What's the height? You aren't checking for codes, you aren't checking for on-site wastewater. So those are a few things that slow us down compared to other communities, but this will also allow people to check and see where it's at online and monitor it, email back and forth. So hopefully make it much more transparent of, hey, here's where it's at in the process too. And the thing that I should add too is we've reconfigured the front office a little bit. The vacant position that we have, our administrative assistant left us for the clerk's office, which is great. She's enjoying her work over there, and she's a great add to their department. I'm very happy for Tracy. But we're looking to hopefully fill this, and since we're going to hopefully be decreasing the amount of administrative work that we do on just the file pulls and paper shuffling, is look to add more duties to this person at a higher level and higher function. We also last year went down a records clerk. So we did have somebody on board that was scanning in things as best as possible by herself, and instead we're asking to ship it out and just get it done and over with, and hopefully save long term to the town instead of adding a position back to get that scanned. It's just a one-time project.
So we've reduced the staffing by 10 hours in this department. At the same time, we're going to hire an additional higher level professional person to help with more of the long-range planning projects. But at the same time, they'll be helping out with manning the front desk and providing admin support to the rest of the folks here. Okay.
Good plan.
Good.
Excellent.
Thank you all for coming down and seeing our home.
Yeah.